Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Stacy Varghese, and I'm the Director of Leadership Annual Giving and Engagement at St. John's University. Today, we have Father Patrick Flanagan, who will speak on technology and ethics. Some housekeeping rules before we begin. If you have a question, please submit it on the bottom right in the Q&A section to panelists and host, and they will be answered at the end of the presentation. Now, I'm excited to introduce our speaker. Father Patrick Flanagan grew up in Wantagh, New York, and has taught at St. John's University as an associate professor of theology and religious studies since 2003. Ordained a Catholic priest with the Vincentian community in 1992, his first assignment was as parochial vicar at Immaculate Conception RCC in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. After 2 years, he returned to his alma mater, Niagara University, to serve as campus minister. In 1998, he moved to DePaul University to work on his doctorate in theological ethics at Loyola University, Chicago, where he wrote a dissertation on the intersection of the common good and information technology ethics. Welcome, Father Flanagan. I will hand the webinar controls over to you now.
Thanks, Stacy, and thanks to all who are listening or watching this presentation. So my topic today is the retrieval of civility in cyberspace. And to whom is it geared? Well, first of all, it's geared towards us as individuals in trying to take control of our lives and our relationship with our technology, because ultimately that comes down to our personal preferences as well as our personal habits and virtues, as you're going to see it as this presentation unfolds. Secondly, it goes towards parents who are quite frustrated with the fact that their children are tethered to technology all the time. My friends Phil and Christine have 3 boys. They're students of mine from the early 2000s, and they always ask me, Flanagan, can you help me out? And it's the same that's echoed in the schools. So teachers, administrators, I have a friend, Father Jim Caroli. Father Jim Caroli is Cathedral Prep Rector President, and he has asked me over and over again, how do I get these machines away from these kids? The difficulty is it's not like booze or food or drugs or anything of that nature. We need the technology to live. But can we live in a civil society in a civil way with this technology? When we think about our relationship to technology, we think about our history. So I grew up in the early 90s when technology was first released. So you see the bottom left-hand corner, you see my first Apple computer. It was the most fascinating thing in the world. I was so excited to hear you got mail. And now when I hear you got mail and open up my inbox, I get very frustrated. But remember we first got together and we spoke about how technology was going to transform our world, to engage and build community, to empower us with successful info, to enhance quality of life in the global village. And it gave rise to terms like global village, electronic superhighway, information age, electronic frontier, many other terms like cyberspace and even Wikipedia. One of the earliest critics, though, Langdon Winter, in 1996, spoke about how technology is becoming more and more overbearing in our lives. And we find ourselves being almost enslaved to that reality. So I'm going to speak a bit today about how technology can alienate us from ourselves and from others. And our addiction to our devices has challenges. And one of the videos I showed to my students is the video there, look up, and I'm going to send you this presentation by the end of our time together. At the very least, I would argue that we are people who, when we engage in technology, can be very aggravated and frustrated with the anarchy that exists online, especially when we're not the kings and queens there. The challenges to technology are, first of all, it's the internet of everything. So it's not that we want to step away from it. We cannot step away from it because the internet technology is everything. So right here in my room at Murray House at St. John's, I have this beautiful, what you call it, computer, as well as Alexa right behind me. And she's going to pick up in a second, I'm sure, hearing her voice. It's a disruptive innovation in our lives. Now, you may remember the term Luddites, and it comes from the man Ned Ludd, who just wanted to move away from that reality of technology. And the harsh realization in our lives that we can't move away from our technology. We have to be engaged in technology, but how do we do that prudently? At the same time, we recognize from more recent events in the news that we have to be concerned with security and privacy. If not, someone's going to be holding our systems hostage, holding our information hostage, and asking us to pay a significant amount of money in Bitcoin for their releasing our information. The other more insidious realities is that there are echo chambers. What do I mean by echo chambers? Echo chambers is the fact that if I were to go to any one of our internet histories, I would find that we go to the same places all the time. So the technology confirms our opinions, our thoughts, our political leanings, our ecclesial leanings, our social leanings, all those things. And that's not what technology is supposed to do. It's supposed to open up our horizon. The other insidious reality is cyber cascades. Someone gets some news, whether it be real or fake, and it just takes off like wildfire. That's problematic. That's extremely problematic because no one's checking the veracity of the news. On the right-hand side, you see up there a whole list of other challenges, cyberbullying. And this not only occurs within the context of young people, but also adults also, I'm going to point out. Viruses and other attacks like spamming. I don't know how many of you have been privy to the fact that on text messages now, I constantly get alerts from Amazon and from Chase telling me I need to update my account, my password's out of sync. That's what they call spamming. What technology has done is offered a new platform for abuse. Technology itself is not a bad thing. Technology is actually a good thing. But we who are the people engage in awfully painful, sinful, and challenging realities towards other people in this new arena. It can be filled with disinformation, as I said, with regards to cyber cascades, as well as fake news. But we also recognize that there's this thing called the digital divide. I'm spending a lot of time these days writing a paper on the digital divide. It has to do with this reality that as much as we celebrate technology, there are a boatload of people in the world that do not have access to technology. And what's coming in the future is robotics and artificial intelligence. I was just in the city, New York City the other day, and I could not believe they put together this coffee shop. I don't know what's going to do with Starbucks, where they actually, you just sit there and place, you speak into this phone, you tell them what you want, and this machine makes your coffee and hands you your coffee. It's phenomenal. There's a whole other set of issues too at the micro level and how we engage online. And we're going to see that in a second. So you see the list here. How online engagements can be abusive. We can engage in flaming, doxing, swatting, shaming, trolling, lurking, revenge porn, slut shaming, reputation attack, blackmailing, and harassment. And I think one of the key pieces is you see on the left-hand side, something like leaving Facebook or any other social media site may be good for your emotional well-being, but you'd be less informed about current events. I know for my students, I ask my students what they read the Times, what they read the Journal today. They have no sense of any engagement with anything like a hard copy. Everything's online these days. How do we respond to these issues? Well, there are a number of different organizations that have spoken and taken issue with the fact that cyber speech has gotten out of hand, that activity online has gotten way beyond what they expected. And so in a very small way, they're trying to keep at least our children safe. So they have websites that have these different emojis and different icons that appear and say that they're good. This fellow on the left, Cyberspeak, speaks about how difficult it is, though, to actually police the internet. And it's not easy at all. You recognize that. Even in your corporations, even in your businesses, your educational institutions, your home. You try to police, you try to keep it organized, and you recognize that there may be a power that's beyond you. So my proposal is that we try to engage in some sorts of civility. And we recognize that this is quite antithetical to our reality these days. It's about being polite in our expressions, about reasonable. It's about polite, good, and respectful behavior. It's about comportment. And is it possible? Is it possible to have a lack of roughness or crudities? Is it helpful to be courteous to others? It's a challenge at times. So how do we do this? So there is a phrase called netiquette, and so I want to suggest that we can achieve a civility in cyberspace, or as one of my colleagues would say, I'm being pretty naive. But it's this business about teaching our children, teaching ourselves, teaching our colleagues that a couple of things. So the first move that we might want to make is to get offline, and the other move might just be the opposite, is to fight and to cleanse. But as much as we try to fight and cleanse the internet, we recognize we may be up against even more painful and more powerful forces than we can imagine. But the initial moves that we make might also lead us to a breaking point where we might find ourselves, this is insane, this is ridiculous, I can't do this anymore. So what does this have to do with us then? Well, maybe we cannot control the common good of technology, but maybe we can take personal responsibility and we can set up some sort of rules of the road for ourselves. Now, does that mean we might be less abused or less used by others? No, but it'll give us a sense of peace, it'll give us a sense of civility. And so one of the key pieces I tell my students all the time is that it's critical to recognize that anything we put online is archived forever. Now, they have Snapchat, they have these other disappearing realities that they believe go away. But we also recognize that as we move more towards the future, all these free social media sites are all about gathering data and using our data. So I ask my students to think, as you see on the left-hand side, is what you're posting true, helpful, inspirational, necessary, or kind? As I say, the internet is forever, and don't develop a bad reputation. Just recently, as you might have seen, Christy Teigen her whole line was pulled down from Bloomingdale's because of something she posted when she was a teenager. Things last forever. You may remember from your philosophy classes, your theology classes, this set of cardinal virtues: prudence, temperance, fortitude, and justice. Those will be the guiding forces as we move forward in this presentation. But I think of Aretha Franklin, and I think about respect. And I also think about the basic fundamental Christian prompting that we have here at St. John's. I tell you, who here, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who mistreat you. To those who strike you on the cheek, offer also the other. And from the one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your coat also. Give to everyone who asks you, and don't ask them who takes away your goods to give them back. It's that sense of generosity, it's that sense of care. It's not about being used, but it's about respect and civility. So I'd like to suggest that there are 7 dangers of technology. And for those who are old enough to remember Lost in Space, you remember Danger Will Robinson all the time, and the difficulty that he faced as he moved through that future. When we think about our lives and online, we can do anything and everything online. And people have capitalized on that in such a way that it has become so problematic. So the classic example is Bernie Madoff. I used my business ethics class. But there are other realities too. My niece is an agent for the state, and she just is always in the process of busting another scam related to the coronavirus and the CARES Act and the PPP loans. Also, we recognize that TV stations also have scam alerts. Those of you sports fans, those of you Pope fans, you recognize that people sell tickets and that they're not real. People get to their sites, their games, and find out that they're not real. Or we get a check in the mail. So we call them 409 scams. People tell us that we have a lost relative, that we just won the lottery, and people fall for them all the time. That's why they continue. One of the key shows that I like to watch once in a while is Catfish, where people actually catfish others into believing that there's someone else. So I think about sin, glorious sin. So the medical doctor called Menninger asked the question, whatever became of sin? And David Brooks in New York Times spoke about the road to character. Both those things put in perspective that sin is real and that people are going to engage in malicious, vicious, and destructive behavior. And perhaps, as David Brooks points out, it's about retrieving character. When I had spent this summer in Dublin at the Vincentian University over there, at All Hallows. I was privileged to see his statue on the left-hand side. And I saw it was Oscar Wilde. And Oscar Wilde said this: be yourself, everyone else is taken. And we recognize that we're called to be authentic human beings that are rich with integrity. And yet at the same time, we find that when people go online, they want to be someone else, or they're willing to let down their guard and willing to engage in some sort of activity that's suspect. We think about Canal Street here and how many people go to Canal Street anticipating getting their latest Rolex only to find out that it's fake. How do we do that? It's all about big dreams, but it's about baby steps. And hopefully this presentation will offer you some baby steps on how to retrieve civility online. When I was early on in my religious life, I went to this leadership conference. And so I was expecting to learn all about how to deal with disgruntled employees, how to deal with contracts, how to deal with unions, how to deal with the reality of organization in the organization. But what I found was that we spent a lot of time working on taking these personal inventory quizzes and reviewing these results, the Rorschach exam, the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, the MMPI, all those things. And essentially it was critical for us to do this, because what happens with us is that if we want change, we must know ourselves well, and we must be attentive to the person we're called to be, that person of the authentic human person and the person of integrity. I think about the move in our lives, that we are constantly on the moves to thinking about who we are and what we're about. So we engage in moral actions over and over again that become habit, that become almost part of our character and second nature. I think you recognize that the difficulty is that if we engage in immoral action and that becomes a habit, then that immoral lives could become second nature to us, where we let things slide. It becomes a very slippery slope, and we find ourselves allowing for a lot of sinful activity, a lot of activity that could be problematic. The Greeks had a great word, arete, which meant excellence. And over again in so many of these self-development courses and some of these activities towards moving from good to great, we see more and more the reality of people speaking about moving towards excellence. And I have this thing about rules versus virtue up here, because that has been very helpful in my life as a teacher. When I first started teaching here at St. John's, I would tell students they can't have this, they can't have that, they can't have that, and they must do this, must do that. And now, the generation that sits in front of me, I find that I have to make a value proposition. And in so many ways, that value proposition has got to lead them to achieve virtue rather than just follow rules. Rules are important, there's no question about that. But in order to own the experience, so let me give you an example. Key example is this with technology. When I first started teaching here in 2003, I would tell the students, the first time I catch you, I'll correct you. The second time, we'll talk to the dean. The third time, you're out of my class. I was that tough. And now I realize, because I would say that, once you go into the boardroom, once you're on the trading floor, once you take out your technology, you're done. But the reality is, I've been on the trading floor, I've been in the boardroom, and I've seen people put their phones right in front of their face and still do what they need to do. What I do tell them, though, is that every time they pick up the phone, every time they engage technology, they're giving someone or something the power to interrupt, disrupt their creativity and their very lives. That's the first value proposition I offer them. The second value proposition is, if you respect my time and your classmates' time, I'll respect yours by not being distracted by technology. This has been the best thing in the world, and it's worked with this value proposition over rules. So the 7 deadly dangers of technology, I'd like to propose that these dangers of technology are grounded in this, what has been known in philosophy and theology for generations as the seven deadly sins: lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. Let's take each of them by for those who are familiar with Gilligan's Island, I have 2 generational pieces here. If you would just, I'll give you the answers at the end as we move towards this. If you just look at this picture, each of the people on Gilligan's Island reflects a different deadly sin. Now, if you're not part of that generation, maybe you're part of the SpongeBob generation. And every member of SpongeBob, each of these characters, reflects another deadly sin. So let's look at pride. Pride stands at the head of the deadly sins. It's about vanity. It's about excessive beliefs in one's ability. It's all about me. So two things I want to say about pride. The first thing is that, I don't know about you, but in my list of followers and those who I follow, if people start overposting, if people start talking about way too much about themselves, they either get muted or they're unfollowed because it just gets too exhausting. And we see how easy it is online to be proud. But the other reality is that pride is dangerous, because you see on the right-hand side up top is that so often people who take proud pictures of themselves standing in front of something often end in very problematic, even deadly situations. What pride does is isolate ourselves from others, as you see in the bottom left-hand side and the bottom right top side. It basically lets us live in worlds where we're echoing to ourselves what we believe is important. Pride. Second one is envy. I'm just amazed at how many people post pictures of their situation and how they show off. And at the same time, it gives us reason to feel worse about ourselves. So people will get in front of a major helicopter, as you see up there, or even go to the extreme of having a blue screen behind them, green screen behind them, and then posting it with what they want on Instagram. It's all about showing off on social media. The difficulty, the challenge though, is that I go online and I see these pictures of my friends doing that, and I develop such an envy for them and their situation. And that leads me to a sense of sinfulness, because it does not acknowledge, indeed, how richly blessed I am. Wrath. So it's a choice to remain angry at someone or about something. In the Judeo-Christian scriptures, it's very clear that Jesus gives the injunction. You have a problem with somebody, you go talk to that person. That person doesn't hear you, bring a couple of friends. If they don't hear you and your friends, then you can take it to the assembly. I'm a firm believer in that. So I have a TripAdvisor account, I have a Yelp account. I don't have to rate my professors, but I know that my students rate me on there. But on the TripAdvisor and the Yelp, I always write very positive things, but there are some instances where I write some tough, harsh things. And people say, why couldn't you have spoken to these folks? And I'll say, I did, and got no response. One of the devilish realities of my life is that I miss the comments section on so many of these websites because they take them down for legal purposes. But you recognize that the comments section is really filled with a lot of wrath and fury. So as you see on the other left-hand side, drink bleach and die. People don't hesitate to put down some things online that they would never say to a person face to face. And that's what people are prompted to do. I love this cartoon. I just found it the other day. It's about getting ready to read the comments section on something. I have to put on protective gear in order to deal with that reality. Greed, avarice or covetousness, the desire for material wealth or gain at the expense of others, of self. So as I said to you, I grew up in the early 90s, and so I was part and parcel of the Napster generation. And the Napster generation was a time of glorious wealth. You can go online and get any program, any music, any book you wanted. Literally, everything was for free. It was response, though, if you recall, to the corporatism or the capitalism of the industry that made us pay for everything. That's greed. That was greed on the part of Napster. And unfortunately, honestly, I participated in it just briefly. in the middle, you see this guy, this guy with sunglasses. And this guy with sunglasses is Kip Boga. And he has a famous YouTube channel where he takes down these scammers on the right-hand side. So people call you, me, all the time. I get a call pretty regularly. I don't know why they keep on persisting. Tell me my car is out of warranty. I don't have a car, and nor do I have a warranty. But the unfortunate thing is I like to play with them a little bit. And that's a little problematic on my part. But at the same time, these people are greedy. Now, we might say to ourselves, well, they live in the global part of the world where they are suffering, and they have a right to do this. No one has a right to be greed, avarice, or covetousness, engage in covetousness. And this guy always dismantles that reality. We think about sloth. The great example we have of sloth is that animal, and how the sloth is just a blob. It's the avoidance of work or failure to be prompted to participate. So early on in my semester, in my tenure here, I had a student from Bulgaria, Miroslav Chakchov. And Miroslav disappeared for 2 weeks. And I said, Miroslav, where you been? He says, you know, I just came to the States, and he says, I found this thing called Netflix. And I just got addicted to it and just blobbed in front of my TV for 2 weeks. I said, you gotta be kidding. And he said, no, he says, I'm guilty. Guilty as charged. But I see that often enough. People engage in Netflix, ESPN, and even with other social media. They just sit there and scroll through their media, and they're just sloth or blobs, as you might say. The other connectedness to sloth is this thing about lurking, is that some people enjoy watching other people more so than engaging in life. It's cyber stalking, it's about cyber lurking. It's that reality where we do not participate in life. It's just being a blob, being engaged in other people's reality. Gluttony. So it's the overindulgence and overconsumption to the point of waste. So often I'll ask my students to do an evaluation of how much time they spend online. And now they can do it just by looking at their screens, because they give them the amount of screen time. But often enough, they'll tell me they go to bed looking at technology, and they wake up by grabbing the technology. And so often enough, we think about gluttony as being overconsumed with food, but it's being overconsumed with anything, essentially. And when we think about this, we find ourselves being so exhausted by the technology that to the point where we cannot live without it, that technology becomes more important than relationships. This author in the middle, William Powers, is a fascinating author. He did something that I don't think I could do. Perhaps you could do. He spent a year living without technology. He got rid of his smartphone, and he engaged solely with his flip phone. And when he had to go to go online, he went online at a public library here in New York City. I would find that very depleting. I would find it almost engaging in some kind of reaction to my addiction to technology. But every time I read another text or article by William Powers, I find it appealing, but I know how hard it is, because I myself can be so gluttonous when it comes to technology. It's a problem, though, as you recognize, because the more gluttonous we become in technology, the more used to we find ourselves connecting with people online and having conversations online and having difficulty with live conversations. And that's going to be my point here with regards to civility. How are we able to engage in civic conversations, perhaps uncomfortable conversations, when we're so used to just being digital warriors? So this video, I'll send you this presentation in a second, but this video here is the video that I show my students. And I'm going to show you just a brief clip here of it.
I have 422 friends, yet I'm lonely. I speak to all of them every day, yet none of them really know me. The problem I have sits in the space between looking into their eyes or at a name on a screen. I took a step back and opened my eyes. I looked around and realised that this media we call social is anything but. When we open our computers and it's our doors we shut. All this technology we have is just an illusion. Community, companionship, a sense of inclusion, yet When you step away from this device of delusion, you awaken to see a world of confusion. A world where we're slaves to the technology we mastered. Our information gets sold by some rich, greedy bastard. A world of self-interest, self-image, self-promotion, where we all share our best bits but leave out the emotion. We're at our most happy with an experience we share. But is it the same if no one is there? Be there for your friends, and they'll be there too. But no one will be if a group message will do. We edit and exaggerate for evangelization. We pretend not to notice the social isolation. We put our words into order and say that our lives are glistening. We don't even know if anyone is listening. Being alone isn't the problem. Let me just emphasize. We read a book, paint a picture, or do some exercise. You're being productive and present, not reserved and recluse. You're being awake and attentive and putting your time to good use. So when you're in public and you start to feel alone, put your hands behind your head, step away from the phone. You don't need to stare at your menu or at your contact list. Just talk to one another. Learn to coexist. I can't stand to hear the silence of a busy commuter train where no one wants to talk through the fear of looking insane. We're becoming unsocial. It no longer satisfies to engage with one another and look into someone's eyes. We're surrounded by children who, since they were born, have watched us living like robots, think it's the norm. It's not very likely you'll make world's greatest dad if you can't entertain a child without using an iPad. When I was a child, I'd never be home. Be out with my friends and I'd like to room. I'd wear holes in my trainers and graze up my knees, build our own clubhouse high up in the trees. Now the park's so quiet it gives me a chill. See no children outside and the swings hanging still. There's no skipping, no hopscotch, no church and no steeple. We're a generation of idiots, smartphones and dumb people. So look up from your phone, shut down the display. Take in your surroundings, make the most of today. Just one real connection is all it can take to show you the difference that being there can. Be there in the moment as she gives you the look that you remember forever as when love overtook. The time she first hold your hand and first kiss your lips. The time you first disagree but still love her to bits. The time you don't have to tell hundreds of what you've just done because you want to share this moment with just this one. The time you sell your computer so you can buy a ring for the girl of your dreams who is now the real thing. The time you want to start a family and the moment when you first hold your little girl and get to fall in love again. The time she keeps you up at night and all you want is rest. The time you wipe away the tears as your baby flees the nest. The time your baby girl returns, a boy for you to hold. The time he calls you granddad and makes you feel real old. The time you take in all you've made just by giving life attention and how you're glad you didn't waste it by looking down at some invention. The time you hold your wife's hand, sit down beside her bed. You tell her that you love her, lay a kiss upon her head. She then whispers to you quietly as her heart gives a final beat that she's lucky she was hers by that hot boy in the street. But none of these times ever happened. You never had any of this. When you're too busy looking down, you don't see the chances you miss. So look up from your phone, shut down those displays. We have a finite existence, a set number of days. Don't waste your life getting caught in the net, as when the end comes, nothing's worse than regret. I'm guilty too of being part of this machine, this digital world we are heard but not seen, where we type as we talk and we read as we chat, where we spend hours together without making eye contact. So don't give in to a life where you follow the hype. Give people you love, don't give them your like. Disconnect from the need to be heard and defined. Go out into the world, leave distractions behind. Look up from your phone, shut down that display. Stop watching this video, live life the real way.
Sorry.
Bye.
So the last one we have to deal with. Let me just go back to this one second. Bye. Okay. I will give you the answers. So this video I show at the beginning of my class also, and it's extraordinarily helpful because it really makes students pause. And I tell them it's not only their generation, but it's an older generation also. It spans the whole life spectrum. And I can get myself in trouble once in a while. I have great friends that constantly are reminding me to be careful. And so one of the things that I'll often say to them is I take pictures of people who are using their phone and not engaging in conversation online. And it's not only it's not only children, but it's also adults too. So I remember being one of my favorite diners in Call Place, the Majestic Diner, and I almost got caught because I was watching. I turned around to take a picture of this group of ladies that were taking they're on their phone, just engaging in conversation on phone while they were sitting there. And this lady caught me taking a picture, and I just proceeded to fix my hair, what little hair I have. And so the woman says, "Oh, he's taking a picture of us." And then the other lady says, "Oh no, he's just fixing his hair." I was grateful she did that because I didn't want to get caught. The next one I want to talk about is sex, and you recognize that sex is always problematic for our American culture, and it becomes easier and easier then as you recognize. Let me just see if I can expand this. Back to a second. All right, sorry about that. See if I can expand this here. That'd be good for now. Let me get back here in a second. So the last one is about sex, and it's about lust. And you recognize that sex, it can become an obsession in our American culture. And you also recognize that lust is defined as inordinate cravings for the pleasures of the body. Sex becomes so much easier online. So where in the past we might have had Rent Boy to appeal to the gay population, Ashley Madison to appeal to the cheating population of males and females, and then Tinder to appeal to every generation that wants to have a relationship or a hookup. We now have OnlyFans. I do this in class with my students. I said, is OnlyFans, is that a moral entity? OnlyFans is essentially showing yourself off online. And it's an incredible amount of money people make. I could not find any American data. So I found this data with regards to English pounds, British pounds. Black China makes $15 million a month, and Cardi B makes $7 million a month. Unbelievable. So where did we end up here? How did you do on this the 7 deadly sins on Gilligan's Island? Or on SpongeBob? So given all those deadly sins, and in an effort to retrieve civility, how can we respond? Well, these days we should have been sending our students forth on this great lawn here on campus, but that will have to wait to July when more protocols are in place. But we ask them to be virtuous individuals. We expect them to be saints. Those who are married for a long time, you recognize it's about showing up day in and day out. And that's how we become more virtuous people. It's about baby steps. So starting from the last and going to the first, I think about lust. How do we respond? We respond in chastity. Now, often enough, as a Catholic priest, people say to me, you know, I can't believe you take the vow of chastity. And I said, we all take the vow of chastity. It's about that sense of respecting another person. It's about being attentive to the person and not just about their physical parts. Gluttony. It's about that sense of balance. It's about that temperance. Greed. Being more generous. Sloth. It's about being more diligent. Wrath. It's about being patient. It's about approaching the other and being honest in conversation. It's envy. We think about envy. And so often when I would go to confession, and it still happens today, I'll speak to the confessor. I'll say, I'm envious or jealous of the other person and what they have or who they are. And my confessor will tell me over and over again, tell the person, give the person acclamation for, in fact, what they're about. And then pride. It's about humility. It's about being that person who not only celebrates one's accomplishments, one's attributes, but those of others. When I think about how to achieve this, I think about going back to virtue and all the virtues that I just mentioned. And I think about the experience of Karate Kid. And I want to just share this video with you here in an effort to show you how little things pay off.
Funny, I learned how to sand your decks, maybe. I wash your car, paint your house, paint your fence. I learned plenty. Not everything is as simple. Oh, bullshit. I'm going home, man. Daniel-san. Daniel-san. Come here. Show me sand the floor. I can't move my arm, right? What are you doing? Ow! Ow, what are you doing? Oh, show me sand the floor. How did you do that? Shut! Sand the floor. Show me sand the floor. Sand the floor. Sand the floor. Big supper. Sand the floor. Sand the floor. Show me wax on, wax off. Hey. Wax on, wax on. Wax on, wax on. Hey, wax on, wax off. Look to my eye. Stand inside. Wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off. Show me pentafence. Up, down. Down. On the side. Look, hey, always look like. Show me penthouse. Say. Not list. Say. Show me wax on. Show me pentafence. Show me cyberbullies. Show me sand off.
One of the fascinating pieces about this video is the very fact that students, when I show this to my students, they get it, because I hope that my effort here is clear also, is that we have to take baby steps. And some of the baby steps we take towards retrieving civility online may not make sense. We might get frustrated that we want to get in the game right away, but it's about moving in small baby steps that lead us to participate in the big game of life and make us less frustrated. How do we learn virtue? It's by learning and living. And it's about getting in the game and practicing and living over and over again. So I'll use this example for this reality. I have a handicapped sister. When I came back from Chicago in 2003, if you would have met me in 2003, you would have said I was the most impatient person in the world. She's deaf and she's mentally challenged. And so Kathy and I would go out every Wednesday, take a bowling, and then we go get something to eat and bring it back to our group home in Garden City. And my sister would always remind me that I was called to be a virtuous person. And Mary would say, you have to be more patient. And I said, I don't know how to be more patient. But then I learned it was about watching other people who are patient and about getting back in the car every week and practicing. Now you might say I'm the most patient person, or at least in my pride, I like to think I'm the most patient person. It's about learning and living, and that's how we engage each other online to build that arena, that world, that cyberspace of technology that can become very problematic and very uncivil. So here's my info, and I'm going to share this with Stacy and the whole presentation, and she'll take it back right now. Thank you for your time, and I wish you well. I'm happy to take any questions or be available at any other time.
Thank you, Father. I do see one question coming in. What is the difference between morals and ethics?
I laugh because so many of my colleagues in the academy, they they speak about this difference between moral and the ethics as being morals is for a group and ethics is for an individual. I'd like to suggest this. This is a better way of doing this in some respects. I'd like to suggest that ethics is guided by 3 V's: vision, values, and virtues. And morals is what we see. So the example I use in class is often enough is the experience of me calling down to Alabama. And you might say, what's Alabama? So one of my first assignments was at this place called St. John the Apostle in Alexander City, Alabama. And St. John's in Alabama still has some people that are using dial-up. And so I'll call down there and they'll say, you know, I said, who's online? Who's on the phone for so long? And they'll say to me, oh, Chad was on the internet. And I'll say, no one ever goes on the internet. I said, the internet, as you recall, was developed after World War II when the United States built both the superhighways as well as the super information highway. And we never see the internet. It's what lies underneath. The only thing we see is technology, the computer screens. When the internet goes down, technology is affected as we know it on our screens. My point is this: ethics is the infrastructure of morality. So morality is what we see. It's the reality of who we are. So I'll give you an example. I see a student, I have a bird's eye view of my room right to the great lawn of the campus. I always see people doing great things for other people. But I often ask myself, what motivates them? So in my business ethics class, I'll often speak about, you know, when you have a problematic employee or when you have a good employee, you want to get behind that employee and ask, what are the 3 V's that motivate them to do the good that needs to be done? The virtues, the values, and the vision. And those 3 things will tell you what undergirds their morality. So morality is what's seen, and ethics is what lies underneath. The question I ask my business students is, if you want to change a corporation, if you want to move a corporation in a different direction, what would you work on first? The morality or the ethics? I don't have an answer, and it's a great lively discussion. But I'd be curious to know, moving forward, if in fact any of you had any comments on that.
Next question. How do you help teachers, staff, and administrators? One second, I lost the question. Here. How do you help teachers, staff, and administration embrace technology?
So I think that, as I pointed out, if we want a civil society, we ourselves need to be civil. One of the challenges that when we confront a lack of civility in our lives, whether it be in our families, amongst our civic communities, our church communities, our school communities, is the immediate response is to be to put up our guard and protect ourselves and to engage in less than civil activity, and that's problematic. So I think one of the things that teachers and administrators and leaders in academia, even in the corporation, even in churches, need to model for those who report to them is virtuous behavior online. And also to model the struggle. Because I think that if teachers and administrators and staff, as well as corporate folks, as well as individuals in churches, don't admit how hard it is for them as individuals themselves, they won't get a hearing when they have to apologize for being online while looking down when they should be looking up. So I think it's about a matter of speaking about the struggle which they go through, and then also going through the struggle, and also trying to build value propositions for the constituencies in order to make it appealing enough that people will follow where they'll lead.
Thank you very much. I think you answered everyone's questions. Do you have any last thoughts before we close?
I wish you well. I'm going to send you my presentation, or Stacy, maybe you can send the presentation to them after I close this out.
I will.
Okay. But thanks for the time and thanks for the opportunity. And if you have any feedback, I'd be curious to hear it, because I'm in the middle of writing this book on this notion about civility in cyberspace. But thank you, and thank you, Stacy, for the offer.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and a very special thank you to Father Flanagan for such an informative presentation. For Father Flanagan's complete bio, please go to stjohns.edu/APD series. Here you will also find a schedule of upcoming webinars and past recordings. I hope you will join us next week, Thursday, May 27th at 10 a.m., where we will continue our networking series and discuss refining your elevator pitch. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.